The people who currently govern us and populate the federal agencies, the executive branch, are, as we talked about earlier, ideologues. These happen to be ideologues of the left. The problem with ideology is it is treated ultimately like a religion. And the unfortunate tendency is to make the following statement: I'm correct. I, as a leftist ideologue who runs the FBI, who runs the CIA, who runs the National Security Agency, who is running the Pentagon, the Department of Defense, whatever, I am right and I am morally superior to everyone else. If you disagree with me, then you are morally wrong. I am always morally right. That translates into permanent government. This is how we ended up in Bolshevik Russia with the dictatorship of the proletariat. The left voted itself into power in the United States and has every intention of staying in power. And it's a mistake to look at it from the standpoint of the two parties, because this new dictatorship has lots of support from people who call themselves Republicans in the status quo Republican Party and organization, which is beginning to look a lot like controlled opposition. We're beginning to see that on the Hill. And you end up with a small minority of people on the right who are standing up and saying, well, this is wrong. This is not consistent with constitutional law. This is not consistent with the culture and the history of the United States. And they're simply being ignored. So I don't think anyone who has heard this from the FBI about what we call whistleblowers, or as you say, informants, and just so people understand, this is not an espionage case. This is not someone who is working against the government. On the contrary, this is someone who comes forward and says, listen, I've been in this organization for 20 years or 30 years or 15 years. I know what's right. I know what the regulations say. I know what's wrong. These people are doing things that are wrong, and reporting that to the legislative body and urging them to take action. I mean, it's quite legitimate. And suddenly, the head of the FBI or the head of the Justice Department is essentially saying, well, they're on their own.
Incredible.
We can't protect them, which tells you that the men in charge are ideologues who've decided they're right. Everyone else is wrong. Nothing matters but what they believe. And either you agree with them or you are the enemy. This is a terrible, terrible dilemma. And it's something that we have not historically faced very often in our history. It's not going to end well for any of us in the United States. But this is part of the paralysis that grips us in foreign and defense policy. We're on a path over which we Americans have very little influence at this point.
On a path of unelected bureaucrats, both in the United States and Europe, terrorizing the world population.
But remember, they are also being supported by lots of elected officials who are enabling them.
True.
They may not be driving it, but they're enabling it for the very reasons you point out. Because you would think in Congress, regardless of party affiliation, people would be outraged.
Yes.
They aren't.
And they're not. And that is the fear, I think, for all of us come 2024 or any election, no matter who we elect, if we elect them, the permanent bureaucracy or whatever, if we wish to call them the deep state, the permanent state will always rule over us unless something changes.
Well, something's got to change.
I said, the structure of a cult is at least, it's in three big picture layers, and each of those layers might have smaller layers. There's an outer school, and with woke and communism, those are people who are morally committed and socially trapped. They think it means what it is to be a good person, and their social circle depends on it. Then there's the inner school, who have begun to quote unquote do the work. They've studied, they've read, they've gone and read the books, they've read the authors like they've been told to, they've learned some of this, they can regurgitate it. They are becoming anti-racists. They aren't committed to the idea of anti-racism, they are becoming anti-racists. They aren't necessarily just interested in inclusion or believe in inclusion, they are inclusive. They are experts in diversity. These are the kinds of things that are happening at the inner school level. And by goodness, they know the theory, and the theory matters, and they are directing everybody below them in the cult. And then above that is the inner circle. That's who's paying for it, in short. That's the party leaders. Maybe the highest level theorists and consultants in a general situation are going to be inner circle, but for the most part, it's the people cutting the checks. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Do they believe in woke theory? I doubt it. I seriously doubt it, but they're cutting the checks. And that's just one example. We don't have to name all these names. We all know the litany of names. We can blame the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, the International Monetary Fund. We can just go down the list of people to blame. The CCP, why not? Throw them on there. George Soros, of course. All these people that are cutting the checks, Ford Foundation, Rockefeller, that's the inner circle. And in my guess, you probably have to go to an island to be and do some compromising things and blackmail on you to be in the inner circle. You don't just get to be in there. You don't work your way up.
Are we learning yet?